Alright, so how I'm doing, I'm going to show you my shock crit, cast on crit, EK guy thing build, yeah. So this is a build I thought to build 3 dragons, because of 3 dragons I think it's really interesting, unique, but I really couldn't think of a good use for it that wasn't any better than just, say, using the element you're supposed to. The dog's going crazy. So, but fire damage can shock, so, like, fireball with crits is really, really strong. But, no, you can also make EK do fire damage, like, say, with added fire or with the Blackgleam. And then, but the problem with using the Blackgleam is you're using a bow, which really isn't a spellcasting weapon, so you can go cast on crit with it, with, say, a Quill Rain, which is really, really fast, and you might be able to get enough, procs, or casts with cast on crit to do good damage, without any spellcaster gear. And that usually is the case, but the problem is usually reflect. So to combat reflect, I'm using Arctic armor, which blocks both fire and physical damage. So I've run the numbers, and I think these are about correct. So if you notice over here, I have sort of tried to calculate the DPS of the build. I'm not really sure what it is. I have 2 types of attacks. One is one with the chain, and I'll get into that later. And that one has maybe 30 to 40,000, I'm not really sure. But my main single target is 14k-ish, not really sure. But here's like all the reflect math. So physical damage, you know, it has a reflect part, but it's being blocked by Arctic armor. But if it crits, it's more, and if it shocks, it's more. Then if I use a granite flask, it reduces the damage quite a bit, which is then reduced by Arctic armor. So with the granite flasks, nearly immune to reflect, even against shocked mobs, and I do cause quite a bit of shock, quite a few shocks. That's just for the physical portion, though. For the fire portion, it's this math over here. So if I do hit a non-resistant mob with a top-end crit, that is triple shocked, I can actually take some damage, but it's still fairly low. And it's not like I hit with that many fireballs, as opposed to EK, which hits like hundreds of times, because of the amount of splash you can do. So I'm running Arctic armor, but I obviously don't have enough mana regeneration for it, because I don't get that much mana regeneration, or have Eldritch Battery. So I'm just gonna warp everywhere, because that seems like a viable solution that's not gonna make me hate playing this game after 45 minutes. So yeah. So if you notice, I'm also kind of shattering mobs. And that's because if you corrupt a quiver, which makes his entire build completely pointless, you can actually corrupt a Blackgleam to do lightning damage. So the whole point of using the 3 dragons to cause shocks is completely nullified by the fact that you can use Vault Orbs to corrupt lightning damage onto a quiver. So I could probably take the mask off and still do that. But instead I can shatter mobs. Like, say, if I ran Hatred. So basically, the helmet is pointless. But, the amount of lightning damage I can do on a crit is much, much higher than it normally would be with any other sort of setup. Because Fireball hits for a lot of damage. Like, this is level 18 Fireball and hits for 1200 top end with about 300 multiplier. So that's around 3600 fire damage on a top end hit for a crit, which is quite a bit of damage to cause a shock, and that can shock bosses even. So the fact that it can shock basically anything in the game is fairly noticeable. So I have 2 links. One of them is one that just has like EK and Fireball and Power Charge and crit. The other one doesn't have that. So Barrage with Cast on Crit, and EK with Power Charge on Crit, and Fireball. So this is like the main single target. Barrage, I think, is way better than Split Arrow is, simply on the basis that it's not enemy position dependent. Split Arrow, for instance, if you fire into a file of mobs, that's a line of mobs in front of you, it kind of hits all around it and doesn't really do much damage. But if you get into a rank of mobs, you can pretty effectively hit all of them at the same time. But it's really unreliable because of that. Barrage, on the other hand, doesn't have that instability to the attacks, so it usually always hits with all the attacks. That's why I'm using Barrage on both these instead of Split Arrow, for instance. It's a couple less hits at high levels, but it's not that big of a deal. I mean, the reliability is way more important. So the second link is pretty much my, I'm going to quote AoE attack. I'm not really sure what it is. But yeah, it's AoE, I guess. So barrage with cast on crit, chain. So chains, the AoE part. And then it has life gain on hit, so I can heal really fast, because every single time I attack, I get 12 hits effectively, optimally. And each one of those hits heals 48 life currently. That's going to be up to like 56, I think, at high level life gain on hit. So, you know, I attack once and I get 500, 600 life back. And it's really, really fast, because this bow attacks really, really fast. Don't quite have the mana regeneration to keep up with it, but it's almost there. It's close enough. Yeah. So, the tree, I basically grabbed a lot of crit, and then some spell damage and stuff. And then some influence nodes, or some aura nodes. And some power charges. That's basically it, just crit, Under Scale. I got herbalism. Because this build crits a lot of times, so if I'm using a skill, I'm not only critting with my attack. All of the skills I have linked to it also crit. So the fact that I'm critting with EK and Fireball all the time while I'm attacking means that basically whenever I attack, I have a chance. If a barrage crits, that's one crit, and each barrage probably is going to launch off 3 of these spells linked to it, so that's 3 more spells, and these have like a 30% chance to crit as well, so it's like out of those 3 spells, one of them's going to crit. So every time barrage crits, I get 3 crits total, and all those crits go into these Surgeon's flasks. So I have a Surgeon's Sanctified flask, and herbalism increases the recovery rate on this flask, so I heal faster. So I like usually crit a couple times, and these flasks recharge really fast because crits happen a lot. I get lots and lots of crits. These things are almost always up. And yeah, if I just use them all, you can kind of see how quickly they recharge. If I can actually get some mobs that don't die instantly. Yeah, it's a lot more noticeable in a group. This build has a pretty bad tendency of simply overkilling everything with single player life. Like, the shock really isn't that important of an aspect on, like, single player life. I think up to about 3 player life is where I actually noticed the, like, damage starting to make sense. I mean, basically, I can go a lot of times without landing a crit, like that just happened, for instance. But when I do land a crit, it basically overkills everything on the screen. But with more and more players, there's more and more life on the mobs, and less overkill, and it's more, like, effective total damage. So, yeah. I used to have this linked to Firestorm, which I think is hilarious. I might do a frame rate kill build later. But for a while I was using Ramirez Banquet and Firestorm to balance out the crit instead of Power Charge on crit. And Firestorm is hilarious. It doesn't really kill mobs, but it certainly kills frame rates. And that's important for a cast on crit build, because parties should hate you for just spamming skills all the time. Oh yeah, this sound, after like 3 days of playing this character, I never want to hear Lightning Warp again. And I wish I could change the sound to something like, I don't know, the Smoke Mine sound. Yeah. One of the funny parts is, if I crit with a, what the hell is she doing? If I crit with a Lightning Warp, I can freeze mobs, which, is interesting. Anyways, that's, sort of the build. And basically how it works. Let's see how quick I can clear out the rest of this map. So the build is pretty much reflect proof, or single reflect proof. Pretty good damage, not too expensive to gear out, which requires a lot of mana regeneration and basically just life on gear. The defense I have right now comes from Grace effectively. I don't have too much life, but I'm getting some life nodes later on. I think by level 90 of the village, probably 5,000 life-ish. Maybe around there. Not really sure, didn't really do the math. But, you know, it's gear dependent. If you have perfect gear, you get a lot more life. But again, the whole build is pointless because you can get lightning damage on Quiver, so you can shock anyways with the EK, and you don't really need to convert it out. Although, it kind of, I don't know. 3 dragons makes it bad. Yeah, basically pointless. Basically, don't do this. Because you can get a better helmet with more resistances and life and defense. The spam. Jesus, the lag. Currently my Arctic armor isn't as high a level as it could be. Because I never move, I don't really care about the mana cost drain of moving with Arctic armor. I mean, it's a little bit annoying, but I can still move around a little bit, just not constantly. So yeah, that's basically the build. Yeah. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you next time. Fuck knows.